This was for decades the hands down most notorious murders to happen in Deschutes County. So 1922, 1923, a man named Ed Logan has a fur trapping cabin up at Little Lava Lake. Another man by the name of Alan Wilcoxon has Elk Lake Resort. He's building the resort up there. Both of them hire a man they believe to be named Lee Collins. He works for both of them off and on over the course of those couple years. He also works with another man named Ed Nichols running fur trapping lines.
What they didn't know is that the man that went by Lee Collins was actually Charles Kimsey, a man with a checkered past. After a dust-up with his employers, Kimsey stole money and furs from them and blew town, never to be seen again. Or so they thought. With Kimsey long gone and winter approaching, Ed Logan hired Roy Wilson and Dewey Morris to join Ed Nichols at the cabin for the winter to tend to his trapping business.
Wilcoxon, in January 15th, is headed out to Elk Lake to check on his property, stops at the cabin January 15th, has dinner with the three men. The four of them, according to him, stay up late into the night, maybe having a little bit of alcohol, having laughs, talking, sharing stories, have dinner, everything's great. He leaves the next morning. Little does he know he's going to be the last person to see the three men alive.
Now, Nichols told the people back in town that he and his compadres would likely be back in town around February of 1924.
February comes and goes, nobody hears or sees anything from them. March comes and goes, nobody sees or hears anything from them. So by April 13th, family in town are genuinely worried.
On April 13th, Dewey Morris's brother and Roy Wilson's brother-in-law went out to the cabin and came upon a disturbing sight.
They open the door to the cabin. A cat that is very happy to have the door opened, emaciated cat, bolts out of the cabin. It's very obvious that something has happened. Dinner is burnt and on the stove, moldy food is around. The calendar is still on January. It's just, spooky.
Over the next several days, family members and members of the sheriff's department searched the area, and it didn't take long until the truth rose to the surface.
By the time they start tracking things even closer, they find one of the sleds by Big Lava Lake. There's also blood on the sled. There's also evidence of a trail leading out into the lake where a hole in the ice has very obviously been cut. Murder is the verdict for all three, and they're buried in Greenwood Cemetery by April 24th.
Almost instantly, the suspicions towards Charles Kimsey began to arise.
Kimsey's actually a suspect in more than just these murders, and in fact, they're pretty sure he killed another gentleman in Salt Lake City, Utah.
The investigation discovered that within days of the murders, two mysterious men walked into a fur shop hoping to make some quick money on a supply of furs that they'd recently gotten their hands on.
On January 22nd of 1924 in Portland, in Schumacher Fur Company, two trappers came in and sold a load of furs. Carl Shoemaker negotiates with them, ends up buying the furs for I think $110, and when he asks for their licensing, one of them produces Ed Nichols's trapping license. So we know that these are the stolen furs. We know that the two men who sell the furs to him are our suspected murderers.
While Kimsey was always the leading suspect, his trail had gone cold, and it stayed cold for 9 long years.
Until one day, in Kalispell, Montana, Lady Justice caught up with Charles Kimsey. Well, sort of.
Carl Shoemaker, the fur salesman in Portland, enough time has passed and Kimsey has aged enough and looks different enough that he's pretty sure it's the same guy, but he can't say for certain and doesn't want to be on the hook for sending an innocent man, to the chair, he says. I think he's quoted as saying that.
Without an eyewitness, the charges against Kimsey were dropped. But before he could walk out the door and disappear once again, another man by the name of W.E. Harrison, whom Kimsey had robbed, poisoned, and left for dead.
He lived, much to Kimsey's surprise. He never, ever, ever broke his story that he was not responsible for any of this. But Harrison was confident Kimsey is who attacked me and who left me for dead. And he is convicted for that and sent to the Oregon State Penitentiary in 33.
Thus, justice was served for one of our bad guys. But if you'll recall, I said there were 2 men that walked into that first shop in Portland.
Who's the second murderer? That's the mystery part of this story. Charles Kimsey, everyone knew him to be a very threatening, very scary guy. The descriptions of him that comes from the wanted poster, nobody wants to be around Charles Kimsey.
So it appears that one man got away with murder. But since Kimsey was never convicted of any of his murders, you could say he got away with it too.
Kimsey is in prison until 1957. At the age of 72, he's paroled, even though he's gone in front of the parole board a couple of times and never recanted, never confessed, never apologized, said he was sorry. Definitely nothing like that ever came. And so at the age of 72, he walks away from prison, and that's when he kind of disappears into who knows where.
For Central Oregon Daily News, I'm Scott Elness.